Hi everyone, this is Lulu, and in this video we'll be painting this adorable live, learn, and grow platter. Grab all your supplies and let's get started. So next we're going to trace over the design onto tissue paper using a pencil. The design is on the lesson plan, so it should be pretty easy for you to see the flower and the writing as well. For now we're just going to trace over the flower and the lettering, but we're going to just place the flower on the lower half of the platter. So like right in the middle, but a little bit lower towards the edge, just to ensure that there's enough space for the writing or later on. And once you have it aligned where you want it to be, where it looks pretty good and centered, go ahead and use a marker to follow along the lines and trace over the design. Remember that the pencil and the marker lines will disappear, so if we do any sketching or just as you see here, any tracing, these lines will disappear, and only the lines that will stay are whatever gets painted. So whatever surfaces we paint will have a color, but this will completely disappear, so don't worry about any mistakes made. Alrighty, so now we're going to move on to painting. So we're going to be using our medium brush and about 2 coats of Tweety Bird. And we're going to paint on the center circle of the flower right in the middle. And you're more than welcome to try to stay within the lines, and it's okay if you go a little bit over. That's not a problem whatsoever. Make sure to cover that surface really well and make sure to do your 2 coats. Next, we're going to clean off our round brush and we're going to use it to paint the flower actually around the yellow circle using 2 coats of Peachy Keen. So you see this peachy bright color is going to be pretty much the flower. So feel free to paint all the petals one time and then go around again and give them that second coat. As you see, I started off with the lines that are in next to the circle, just because it makes it a little bit easier and it gives me a little bit more control on the surface itself, so that way I don't paint anything I don't want to paint, or it avoids accidents, to be honest. So I would suggest to start off with that part, which those are really easy, quick lines you can do with your brush. Then go in and paint your coats on your flower and make sure to get those 2 coats so the flower surface is all covered. Okay, so next we're going to be using Little Boy Blue and the small round brush. And with this brush, we're just going to paint the halo around the flower with 2 coats of that color. So the idea here is to create a nice edge border to the flower. We will add some accents later, which will disturb this a little bit, but to start off, I wanted to make sure that the whole platter was completely covered and covered well, so all the backgrounds are solid. So for this, I'm going to be doing about two heavy coats, even 3. And I'm just trying to ensure that everything's clean around my flower and the color separation looks really bright and clear. And then, so we're going to paint the scallops around the flower with 2 coats of the Little Boy Blue and using that small round brush. And once you have covered the surrounding space, created a nice halo around your flower, you can switch out to that medium brush again and just paint the rest of it with about 1 to 2 coats of the Little Boy Blue. I suggest 2 coats, but that's just me. That's my preference, but it's up to you, whatever you want to do. Remember that the more coats, the more solid the color will be, and the less coats, the more brush strokes you'll see. All right, so as you see, I did my 2 coats with my small round brush. Now I'm going to switch out to the medium one, and I'm going to cover the space around from that halo all the way to the edge of the plate or platter, I mean, with about 2 coats of that little boy blue. You see, I paint very messily when it comes to surface areas, so creating a nice halo around everything makes it so much easier in the long run. We're gonna add some of the accents I was talking about earlier using, you could use a pencil eraser or a Q-tip to paint dots in that very edge where the blue and the bisque meet. So these can be towards the line or kind of away from the line. Get funky with it. As you see on the platter, the sample platter, there's no right or wrong way to go about it. We're just trying to add a nice little variance of scallops to our space. So for now, I'm just gonna go around all the scallops and adding little dots to kind of create this image or create this design. And yeah, like I said, you can use the Q-tips or you could use the back of a pencil eraser. Just make sure that it's a flat end. And yeah, and we'll continue this until we're done. Alrighty, so next we're going to be using a Little Boy Blue Fun Writer, which is going to be the same color as the big bottle, but now in the smaller bottle, to paint smaller dots around that scalloped area. So as you see, I'm just following around the space that's available to me. And know that if you don't have a fun writer or the ability to use one, you could use the back of a small brush. Any small brush will be just fine, or the tip of a pencil will work just as well. Alrighty, so next we're going to be using the color Water Yolk, and now we're going to paint some dots on the inner circle, on the inner yellow circle with Water Yolk. So keep in mind, I'm also using the back eraser part of my pencil. I just prefer doing dots this way, but you could really use the back of the medium brush or anything else that you think would be better. So if you prefer to do these with Q-tips, you're more than welcome to do it that way. Everyone has a different preference. To me, just between Q-tips and pencil erasers, I prefer the pencil erasers. Alrighty, so next we're going to be using a Water Yolk Fun Writer to do the same thing we did on the border of the flower, but now we're doing it with the Water Yolk on the inside in the yellow section. So all I'm doing is just adding extra little dots to my flower, or to the center of my flower. The next, I'm going to be sketching out the little swirls that go inside the petals. So keep in mind, it's just a quick sketch with a pencil. Just remember not to scratch too hard, just because you don't want to pull any paint up. And then once I have that sketch done, I'm going to also pass my finger through the painted surface, just because I want to make sure that my paint doesn't snag the graphite and it doesn't get messy with that. Then I'm going to be using my detail brush to paint those swirls using the color red, and about 1 to 2 coats at best. Remember that with the detail brush, One heavy coat is plenty and you don't have to go over it too many times. You could also use a funwriter if you are in the studio and choose to do it this way. I like to use detail brushes. They're my favorite tool, so I tend to try to squeeze them in wherever I can, but you're more than welcome to do it whichever way you like. Just keep in mind the funwriter will be a thinner line and the detail brush will be a little bit thicker. Alrighty, so next we'll be using the Old Yeller Funwriter to go over the dots on the center of the flower. So like right there in that yellow center, I'm gonna add another layer of dots with this darker yellow, and I'm using the funwriter. I'm kind of squeezing hard. There's some sections where I feel like maybe my area was still a little too wet, so what I'm doing with my finger is just pushing down and pressing down that little spot and making sure that the paint spreads a little bit better. It's just an easy way to control where your paint is going. Sometimes it kind of wants to blob, so this helps me control it a little bit. So you don't have to do this if you don't want to or if you don't think you need to, but if you feel like the paint is not sitting well, just know you can lightly tap it with your finger and it'll adjust. Alrighty, so next we're going to be using that red funwriter to paint some lines encasing that hexagon we created over the flower, right? If you do not have a funwriter or cannot get your hands on one, remember you can also do some lines with the detail brush. Just remember to press lightly and not too hard so that way your lines are nice and thin. Okay, so next we're going to be using a pencil to sketch out the leaves around the flower and all those little squiggly fun lines that happen around. Keep in mind though that at this point I'm also going to trace my writing just to make sure that my that my leaves are placed in the correct space or the correct place and they don't overlap my lettering. So even though you see me doing all this like fancy stuff right now, I'm gonna stop at some point and realize that I need to trace my lettering. So that's what we're gonna do after the fact. We're going to grab our lettering traced over from earlier with the tissue paper, and we're going to place the tissue paper sheets on top of the surface where I want my letters to be. Here I did it in pieces just because it made it a little bit easier to add a curve. So if you feel more comfortable doing it that way, just grab some scissors, cut it out so that way you just have each word individually and then just trace them all individually as well. But just remember to keep an eye out where everything is, and try to make sure that you're not touching wet paint. So if you need to let things dry, take a couple minutes, pause this, let it dry, and then keep going from here. Alrighty, so once everything has been traced and sketched, we can move on to the next step. I give you a little bit of a close-up here, and something I'm noticing as I am giving you the close-up is that there's some space to make one of the leaves a little bit bigger, so I'm going to take it, I'm going to use my pencil, sketch that on real nice, and then move on from there. So the next step is going to be to use the Tahiti Teal Funwriter to go over our leaves and our squiggly lines. Before we do this, I think I did this off screen, but before you start on your painting, make sure to sand down any graphite that's around the surface, so that way your lines can just stick to the surface itself or to the paint itself and not get wonky because of the graphite. You could do that with a dry brush and just kind of brush away any excess graphite, or you could do it with your finger as well and just kind of like blur the lines a little bit, and this will help ensure that the paint sticks on the surface itself. So we're using the Funwriter here, and we're just creating some thick lines for our leaves and for our swirls. Know that the Funwriter works best with the tip clean, so if you so I would suggest to keep that pin handy. That way you can ensure that if it does get clogged, you have it nearby and you can unclog it from there. Make sure to clean the tip as often as you can, so that way you're not just dragging paint around. One of the last things I'll be doing with the Tahiti Teal Funwriter is I'm going to add a couple dots around my surface. So I'm going to be using just the tip of that Funwriter and just squeezing out as much paint as possible. In some of them, I decided that I wanted them to be a little bit bigger, so I'm using the back of my pencil eraser again. But remember, you could use your finger or you could leave them as is. It's really up to you. Alrighty, so next we'll be using a sponge, a round sponge, to paint the edge or the border of the platter with about 2 coats of Bebop and Blue. So keep in mind, if you do not have a sponge at home, if you're doing this at home, if you don't have a sponge, that's totally okay. Just grab your small or your medium brush and paint the edge of the platter. Kind of be a little bit careful, but you can get it covered as well with about 2 coats. Doing the same process, just gliding your brush around the edge of the platter just as we did with the sponge. And once we're done with the rim, we're going to paint some extra little dot accents on the rim. And I'm going to show you guys what those look like in a second. But here you see that I kind of had an accident with my fun writer. So I just grabbed a Q-tip, I wiped away the surface that it kind of dripped on, and then I'm going to cover that spot again with some more of my Little Boy Blue and cover that surface to ensure that I can fix my mistake before I keep going. Sometimes it's best to correct your mistake before you move on, just so that way you don't forget about it and then find out when you see it fired, right? So yeah, just grab a Q-tip and just kind of wipe it up real quick and let that dry, and then keep going from there. So now I'm just going to be using my Bebop in Blue Fun Writer, and I'm just going to be painting dots from that rim, kind of trickling down towards the center of the image. I'm not going to go very deep in, it's just going to be as close to the edge as I can bring it. And some of them might be clusters, some of them might be a little bit less, but this is just something quick and cute that will add a really nice effect to your platter later on. Something you saw me do here too is that I pushed everything away from me, just because whenever I'm doing things that are rounded or whenever I'm holding onto a platter, I really like to hold on to it, so I need my space to be clear. So just keep in mind that you might need to move some things around as you're going, just to ensure that you have the space available to complete your project on a comfortable space. If you are doing this at home, you can also use the back of a pencil, or I'm sorry, the back of a brush or the tip of a pencil to create those small little dots that go around. It might take you a little bit longer, but it's actually a really fun and relaxing process, so I think you'll enjoy it no matter what. All right, so we're gonna continue on until we get the completed rim. So we're just gonna keep going till where I started. So remember, since we're using the Fun Writer, the dot once is enough, so we don't have to continuously or paint it multiple times, as in coats, you know. We don't have to do that at all. We just have to paint it once and let that dry, and it'll be just as if we had done 3 coats. All right, once you're done adding dots, let's move on to the next step. So using the Black Lab Fun Writer, now we're gonna just add a couple outlines to everything, including the hexagon, as well as all the curly petals of our flower. We're also gonna outline the leaves and the swirls, and once we are ready, we're gonna go and start doing the writing. So right now you'll just see me outline everything, and then we'll meet again when it's time to do the writing. Remember that if you are doing this project at home, you're more than welcome to use the detail brush to create all these outlines. You could also leave them outlined. It's really up to you. Either way, I think it'll look great. Now that we have all the outlining done, we're going to be using that same tool we used to outline, either the detail brush or the Fun Writer, and we're going to go over our lettering. So remember, if you're using the Fun Writer, you want to make sure that your tip is clean and you have that yellow pen handy, so to ensure that there's constant flow coming out of your Fun Writer, and all your lines look good and your paint is flowing as it should. If you're using the detail brush, just know that less is more sometimes with a detail brush, so pick up less paint. Don't try to be too heavy-handed. Take your time with each letter, kind of design them as you're going. And remember that with both tools, you don't have to do 3 coats, because they are the equivalent of 3 coats if used correctly. So with the detail brush, you just have to make sure that you start skinny but add a little bit more weight to your lines as you're going, and that kind of creates those 3 coats effect. And the Fun Writer, using it once is just enough. Alrighty, so here you'll see that I'm working on my platter upside down, just because this allows me the ability to not put my hand on anything wet. So as the flower and the leaves are drying, I get to be working straight on the surface I'm working on, right? So I don't have to drape my hand over or drag my hand over the platter and drag anything wet or anything like that. I'm literally working straight onto the surface I'm working on. So keep in mind, you don't have to do this if you don't feel comfortable writing upside down. You're more than welcome to do it however you feel the most comfortable. Just get in a good position, hold your tools as you should, make sure that you are paying attention to every line as an individual, and yeah, after that everything will come out easy and everything will be able to look really good at the end. Here's a close-up of the finished platter. Thank you so much for painting with me today. Have a great day and bye-bye.